All right, so in your workbooks, you should be on, excuse me, on page, let's see here, 41, okay? And in this lesson, we're going to be going a little backwards from what we've been doing. What we've been doing is I've given you an equation and you have graphed it. So now you're going to have the graph and we will need to write the equation from that graph. So you should see this page on your workbook right now. It says 2.5. Writing equations in slope-intercept form. Okay, so again, we're going to take a graph and turn that and write the equation for that graph. All right, so let's look at activity 1 here. Okay, it says find the slope of each line, find the y-intercept of each line, and then write an equation for each line. So as we look at this, remember, we're writing these in slope-intercept form, so we want them to say y equals mx plus b, okay? And if you remember, your m is where your slope is going to go. Your b is where the y-intercept is going to go. The y and the x will just stay there. So let's look at part A. Okay, find the slope, well, of each line. Well, I know I have a point there. And if I just travel up my line, the next point I know for a fact looks to be about right there. So if I find my slope, remember you do rise over run. So if I start here, I would rise 1 and I would run 2. So your slope is 1 over 2 or 1/2. Okay, let's come down and do the middle line. I have a point here. And I have another point right here. So again, I rise 1 and I run 2. So your slope is 1/2 again. And then if we look at the third line, I have a point here and another point right there. So again, it's the same thing. Rise 1 and run 2. So my slope is 1/2. So if I'm going to write the equation for each of these, okay, let's take this first line, what I've done in green here. Okay, my equation would be y equals m, well my m was 1/2, x, and then your y-intercept is right here at 4, so plus 4. And that would be the equation for that one. Okay, on your red line, if we look at it, let's figure out where it crosses the y-axis, and it crosses right here at +1, so b would be 1. So when you write your equation, y equals m, which is 1/2, x, plus b, which was 1. And then lastly, the blue one down here, my y-intercept on this one, it crosses down at a -2. So when you write this equation, you have y equals 1/2 x, and since that's a -2, we'll write -2. So here are the 3 equations for these 3 lines. It says, what do they have in common? Well, you could tell kind of by looking at them, but it tells you for a fact right here that they all have the same slope. And if you remember from last week or the week before, we know that if they have the same slope, that means that they are parallel. And I'm just going to use the symbol for parallel. Okay, so there's part A. Part B, if we look over here, again we have 3 lines, so I'm going to look at the one that's on the left right here. Okay, well I know I'm going to pick out my y-intercept, okay, and then from there find another point so I can do my slope. So of this line, my slope would be, if I start here, I would go down 2, so that's -2, and right 1, that would be a +1. So your slope is -2. Your y-intercept on that one is right here at -5, so b is -5 for this one. So if we write the equation, y equals m, which was -2, so -2x, and then your y-intercept was -5, so I'll write -5. Okay, For that middle line, see it crosses right here at -1, so I know my y-intercept is -1. And if I find another point right here, use my slope. Let's say I start at this one this time. I would go up 2, so that's a +2. But then you would have to go left 1, so that makes that a -1. So when you write your equation, y equals m, which was -2, x plus b. Well, your y-intercept was -1, so I'll write -1. Okay, and then the last line over here, it crosses the y-axis up here at a +3, so your y-intercept is 3. And your slope, let's see here, let's go down this way. Here's a point right here. So I went down 2 and right 1. So -2/1, again, which is -2. So your equation, y equals -2x plus 3. And then if we look at what they all have in common, again, they all had the same slope. So that means that they are parallel lines. Okay, so I want you to pause the video real quick, and I want you to do that same thing for parts C and D. Okay, you're going to find the slope and the y-intercept of each of the 3 lines, and then write the equation for them. And once you have that done, you can play the video, and then you'll be able to check yourself. Okay, so here's what you should have gotten for part C. Okay, the equation of one line is y equals 4/3 x plus 3. That was this one. The one I have as green is y equals 1/6 x plus 3. And what I have as blue is the y equals -1/3 x plus 3. And what they all have in common on this one is they all have the same y-intercept. Okay, now that doesn't tell you anything special, it just tells you they all cross the y-axis at the same point. Okay, this is for part D. Okay, if you notice that first of all, they all have in common the same y-intercept. Again, that y-intercept is 0. So on these, when your y-intercept is 0, when you go to write your equation, you don't need to write +0 or -0 on the end of it. You can just leave that off. Okay? One thing I do want to point out is on my red line right here, your slope was -1/1. So notice I did not put -1x, I just put -x. If you put -1x, it's the same thing. Okay? Just like if you would have added +0 on the end of these, it's still the same thing. Not wrong, you just won't ever see it written like that. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so here's part D. You can go ahead and check yourself on that. And then let's flip over to page 42. Okay, activity 2, it says find the area of each parallelogram. So just a quick note, the area of a parallelogram is base times height. Okay, write an equation for each side of the parallelogram, and what do you notice about the slopes of the opposite sides? So we're going to do A together, and then I'll have you do B. So first thing is to find the area. Area is base times height. Okay, so your base, all you have to do is count. So if I start here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and then the height. Now you're not counting the slanted side, you're counting straight from the base, straight up to the top. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 7 times 6 is 42. Okay? Then the slopes of the opposite, or of all of the sides, I guess. So the first thing I notice is that the top and the bottom are both straight horizontal lines. Okay? They cross the y-axis. So that means that their equation would be y equals, and then whatever number they pass through. Well, the top line is going to pass through 4, so this would be y equals 4. The bottom passes through -2, so y equals -2. Now the slanted lines, okay? I can pick out the slope pretty easily. There's a point here, here's a point here. So my slope would be, see, I would go down 2 and right 1. So -2/1, which is -2. But for my y-intercept, if you notice, it doesn't cross the y-axis. But what you would do is figure out at what point, where would it cross. So if I continue going up 2, left 1, up 2, left 1, up 2, left 1, I would go up 2, left 1. There would be a point there. Up 2, left 1. So notice it's going to cross up here at 8. So whenever I write the equation, y equals -2x plus 8. Okay, and then for the line over here, okay, let's do our slope first. I have a point here and another point right there. So I go down 2 and right 1. So again, my slope is -2. And then I have to continue this down. So down 2, right 1, there would be a point there. Down 2, right 1. So that would put me at -6 to cross that y-axis. So your equation is y equals -2x minus 6. And what do the opposite sides have in common? Well, they have the same slope. So you know they're going to be parallel. And that was easy because they called it a parallelogram, so you should have known that to begin with. Okay, so again, I want you to pause the video and I want you to attempt part B and then check back here. You can play the video again and then you'll be able to check your answer. Okay, so here are the equations for the lines on part B. So again, our two horizontal were y equals and then whatever number they went through. And then the right-hand side was y equals x plus 1. Left side, y equals x plus 5. And they had the same slope, so again, they're going to be parallel. Okay, let's look down at activity 3. It says the graph shows a trip taken by a car where t is the time and y is the distance from Phoenix. So part A, how far from Phoenix was the car at the beginning of the trip? Well, at the beginning, that's time of 0, so just look at your graph. And they were 100 miles away from Phoenix to begin with. Okay, flipping over to page 43. It says, what was the car's speed? Okay, so if we look back up at the graph, I'm going to come straight to 1 hour because we know that speed is in miles per hour. Okay, now they didn't start at 0 miles. They started at 100. So in 1 hour, they went from 100 miles to 150 miles. So do you notice that they only traveled 50 miles in that 1 hour? So down here for the car's speed, we would write 50 miles per hour. How long did the trip last? I'm just looking at the graph where it ends is at 6 hours. So it lasted 6 hours. And then lastly, how far from Phoenix was the car at the end of the trip? So if we just look at the end and match it up, it was 400 miles away from Phoenix. Okay, so that is interpreting a graph and knowing. We'll use that a little bit later when we start interpreting what the slope means and what the y-intercept means. So now if you go back to our Canvas page for today, you'll be able to get a link onto your assignment for today.